Earlier on BBC News, we reported on some of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations at the weekend. We spoke about several demonstrations across Britain during which people voiced their backing for Hamas. We accept that this was poorly phrased and was a misleading description of the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Now here's the weather.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
Welcome back. I wanted to go from reminding you about what the Israeli Minister for Defense had to say, and now we're going to move to what the Minister for Defense in Australia has to say on the matter.
Well, we join the call of other nations in saying to Israel that in having a right to defend itself, obviously it needs to do that in a way where it acts in accordance with the rules of war, and that's very clear. And indeed, Israel have made comments saying that is how they will proceed.
And are they doing that? Are they doing that right now, acting within the rules of war?
Well, I'm not about to cast a judgment on on what they are doing now, and that's the way in which I would answer your question. And the reason I would answer it in that way is I'm obviously not
puzzled by that.
sitting.
You can't say that Israel's acting within the rules of war right now.
I'm saying that I think Israel is acting within the rules of war.
Okay.
And I'm not casting a negative judgment on what they're doing. And but I guess I'm making this point. I'm not sitting in their control room either, and I don't have all the information available to me that they will have to them, obviously. But it is very important that as Israel walks forward, while having the right to defend itself, and that means acting against Hamas, they do act within the rules of war.
Try to correct you to the answer. The war is not just with Hamas. The war is with all the civilians.
What's the view on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza this morning?
There is no humanitarian crisis because...
There isn't?
There is no. Israel is in charge of the safety of the Israelis. Hamas is in charge of the safety of the Palestinians.
But does that mean, does that mean starve the Palestinian people, continue to, because they will be so hungry and will be so desperate for water and medicine that then they will give up Hamas?
It sounds callous, but I mean, this is a war.
So you've got some people saying that there isn't even a humanitarian crisis, and other people saying that starving the citizens is their strategy to get rid of Hamas, but Hamas is responsible for keeping the people of Gaza safe. We should probably have a look at what's claimed to be the two sides of this war. Okay, I have this article from the 13th of October 2023 titled, How do the Israeli military and Hamas compare in size and strength? According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS, Military Balance 2023, Israel has 169,500 active military personnel in the army, navy, and paramilitary. Crucially, a further 465,000 constitute its reserve forces. Under wartime conditions, its size can go into the hundreds of thousands. In terms of strength and the sort of capabilities it fields, it fits effectively what one would expect from a Western army. How does Hamas compare? The official numbers are unclear. In 2021, the Times of Israel quoted an unnamed senior Israeli commander as saying Hamas had an army of 30,000 men. Obviously, there is a question of the skill and training, where there's a considerable difference between the IDF and Hamas. And not to mention that Israel's defense budget is said to be something like $23.6 billion for 2023.
We have been showing images this morning that illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
So blame Hamas and ask Hamas why they started those atrocities, walking around...
So you acknowledge that there is a humanitarian crisis?
I'm saying there is no. Israel is working...
So what do you think is happening?
what is happening, there is a war in Gaza, a war that Hamas started by committing a horrible massacre on innocent Israelis. The world have seen that. Wait a second.
That are innocent civilians.
Just I want to
I remember a comment that someone wrote in relation to that clip with the UK Israeli ambassador talking about how, she wouldn't see it as a humanitarian crisis if she doesn't see the people it's happening to as humans.
خليك هنا لا خليك جوا خليك جوا سعيد.
Just I want to say and give a little bit of a context. Those people created crimes that are worse than ISIS. When the Americans started this fight of ISIS, together with the coalition forces, over 100,000 civilians got caught in a crossfire. Israel is trying to prevent that. Israel is better than any other army in the world. We are alerting, we are giving them the opportunity to have a shelter.
Overnight there was 3 airstrikes that killed over 100 people according to health ministry. Here they said all of them are civilians. Those are people who evacuated from their homes in Gaza City and in the north, and they fled to the area that Israel asked people to come in. People thought that this area is safe. I was talking to some people here and they said after the strikes that what's the reason of being in what's so-called safe area, so we want to go back to Gaza City. Very worrying moment for the people, for like more than 600,000 people who are taking this city, Khan Yunis in the south and Rafah, as shelters. The airstrikes were 2 in Khan Yunis and 1 in Rafah. And like 90% of those who were killed are not from that area. 90% of them are, they travel on a journey in the last couple of days from their homes in Gaza City and the north, and they came all the way here to Khan Yunis to feel more safe. But they were killed according to a local authority. They said this is a crime and Israel is sending people here to kill them.
And up next, I've got some clips to give you an idea of what journalists on the ground are going through. And just a heads up that they've been translated to English just in the subtitles, so you're going to have to read it.
من المسؤولين الإسرائيليين خلال الأيام الماضية.
ما أنت مدافع رجعني بشدور. ما أنت بشدور.
كما نرى مشاهدينا مراسلنا.
ما أنت مدافع. ما מעניין אותי אם אתה בשידור. מדווח מה אומר דובר צה"ל. מה אומר דובר צה"ל? מקווה מאוד שאתם אומרים דברים טובים. הבנת אותי? מקווה מאוד שאתם אומרים דברים טובים וכל החמאס האלה צריכים לשחוט אותם. הבנת אותי? כי אם אתם לא תדווחו את האמת, אוי ואבוי לכם.
الآن لمراسلنا أحمد راوشة خلال مشاركته معنا على الهواء من أسدود. ما الذي كان يقوله لك أحمد؟
عناصر من الشرطة الإسرائيلية يحاولون أو يراقبون ما الذي نتحدث، وخرج مرة واحدة للصراخ بهذه الطريقة وللتهديد بطبيعة الحال.
تهديد جديد للطواقم الصحفية كما نرى على الشاشة. عنصر من الشرطة الإسرائيلية يتدخل أثناء مشاركة زميلنا أحمد راوشة معنا على الهواء من أسدود.
Rahman is a CNN journalist inside Gaza, and he had to evacuate his own home in the face of these airstrikes. Here's his first-hand report.
أنا مع عائلتي أحاول الهرب إلى بر الأمان. ابني يشعر بالرعب.
خافش يا بابا. خافش.
أقول له لا تخاف يا بني لا تخاف. لكن الحقيقة هي أنا خائف جدا.
اسمي إبراهيم دهمان، أنا صحفي في CNN، ولسنوات عديدة ساعدت في تغطية قصص الناس في غزة، لكنني لم أكن أظن أبدا أنني سأصبح جزءا من القصة.
افتح السيارة.
يوم الاثنين الماضي كنت في الرمال في مدينة غزة عندما طلبوا مني الإخلاء.
اطلع على أول حاجة على شو اسمه.
ولكن أين أذهب؟
فبيتي وعائلتي وحياتي كلها في الرمال مثل كثيرين غيري. ليس لدي أي مكان آخر أذهب إليه. وصلنا إلى الفندق قريب. هناك صحفيون وعائلات وحتى أشخاص بمفردهم. نحن الآن جزء من النازحين بين أكثر من 1,000,000 شخص طلب منهم إخلاء شمال غزة.
هنا بيوصفوش شو اسمه بيوصفوش الفنادق صح؟
بيوصفوش الفنادق لا.
أعلم في قرارة نفسي أنه لا يوجد مبنى آمن. نشاهد الغارات الجوية من نافذة الفندق، وصوت الانفجارات يبقينا مستيقظين في الليل.
يا راسي.
في يومنا الثالث شاهدت مبنى مجاورا يتعرض لضربة جوية أخرى. كان هناك رجل وقع في مرمى النيران. لاحظت أنه ابن عم والدي، والحمد لله أنه أصيب بجروح طفيفة فقط.
أنا لازم أتحرك من الفندق لأنه الوضع كتير صعب.
نقوم بتحميل سيارتنا المتضررة بكل ما لدينا من ممتلكات ونتجه جنوبا إلى خان يونس.
بعد ما طلعنا من الفندق يعني ثواني ضربوا صاروخ أو برميل خرب المنطقة كلها.
نحن الآن في خان يونس، وبالرغم من أن الغارات الجوية ما زالت مستمرة إلا أننا نشعر بأمان أكثر هنا، وإنها مسألة وقت فقط، ولكني أعمل أن نتمكن يوما من العودة إلى ديارنا.
And now to a CNN interview with a Israeli military official that goes for about 5 minutes now.
What more can you say about it?
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. We're trying to solve a 1,300-piece puzzle and to collect information and understand and account for each and every Israeli. So far, we have been able to match most of the bodies of dead Israelis with their identities and to understand who is dead, who is missing, and who we presume is being held hostage. The operations that you refer to, those raids, were aimed at collecting intelligence and understanding and shedding more light on where our people are. And I'm happy to say that we indeed did find some useful intelligence to disambiguate the situation a little bit. I can also say that it is a massive focus of effort of intelligence officers from all over Israel in order to locate where our hostages are and to find a way to get them out.
Hamas has made a claim that 13 Israeli hostages have been killed in airstrikes. Have you been able to confirm that claim at all?
No, I have not. Hamas is a lying, despicable terrorist organization, and I think that their credibility is non-existent. So I would take anything Hamas says with extreme caution. Hamas also said a few days ago, and I think you and I spoke about that they threatened to execute hostages if we don't stop bombing military targets in Gaza. So I am not aware of any confirmation, and I am definitely aware of the fact that Hamas would likely try to place responsibility on anybody else but themselves. Let's be clear, Hamas is responsible for the safety of those hostages, and ultimately they will pay the price for what they've done.
The Israeli government has warned residents in Gaza to move south, wanting more than 1 million to move south over the next 24 hours. There's a number of humanitarian organizations that say that's impossible. Hamas has told people not to move. What does that say about Hamas and why they want people there?
First of all, I think that the people who claim that it's impossible will be proven wrong. I think that history teaches us that whenever a person is fighting for his life and is in a mortal danger, then usually people are able to accomplish quite significant things. And I think that Palestinians in Gaza understand that if they stay in Gaza City in the north, they are endangering themselves much more than necessary, and it is within their interest of self-preservation to move south of the Gaza River. It comes as no surprise to us that Hamas, which has a long and documented track record of war crimes and of using their own civilians as human shields, using civilian infrastructure for their military activities, and firing from schools, mosques, hospitals, infirmaries, and near to journalists, it comes to as no surprise that they are now telling their civilians, don't heed the warnings of the Israelis, don't go south. It makes no sense. The only sense it makes is that Hamas wants to exasperate the humanitarian situation and apply pressure on Israel at the jeopardy of the lives of its own civilians.
The presence of the hostages, how much does it compromise or impact the military operations that Israel is planning?
Yes, this is by far the most complex and I think unprecedented challenge that we have faced. I mean, we have had many hostage situations in our history fighting terrorists, but nothing like this. The sheer scope and the complexity, the amount of people, and the fact that they are held in a hostile area that is inaccessible as of now for us, and in something that was likely prepared in advance and that Hamas was prepared for this, makes it very, very challenging. To answer the question, I would say that the aim of our operation is to dismantle the military capabilities of Hamas. That is what we are doing now, and that is what we will continue to do until it is achieved.
How he says, Hamas is known for firing near schools and hospitals and setting up military operations near journalists, just things that seem to be taken out, which is internationally agreed upon and should not be military targets. But Hamas just keeps setting up operations near these things. Yeah, that would be, and Israel has no choice but to fire at schools and hospitals and journalists. Just wanted to point that out. And I also like in this clip how the interviewer tries to kind of bring up the fact that if you've got hostages in Gaza, are the airstrikes not potentially going to kill the hostages? Because I kind of get a feeling that they don't really even seem to care too much about Israeli lives. And now we're going to move on to a interview with a survivor of the attack on Israeli people, someone who lost both his parents. And so I really wanted to include what he had to say in this video.
Now, of course, as you know, we've got a situation in which Israel is preparing for a ground offensive going into Gaza. What are your thoughts on the military response that we've seen from Israel this past week?
Elena, I must tell you that I'm not crying for my parents. I'm crying for those who are going to lose their life in this war. We must stop the war. The war is not the answer. And I beg you, I beg all the viewers and listeners to do everything in your power to put pressure over everyone that is relevant to stop the war immediately, to freeze the situation. In our family, we are not seeking revenge. Revenge will just lead to more suffering and to more casualties. And even though it's the most horrible day, it was the most horrible loss in lives in Israel since the foundation of the country. I'm afraid that the numbers can be much bigger, an enormous number, and we must do everything to stop the war. And I'm afraid for the soldiers, for the civilians from both sides, from Gaza and in Israel, that will pay in their life. And this is why I'm crying, and this is why it was so important to me in this very hard time to go on this interview and to cry to the world, stop the war, please, just stop the war.
There's more Israelis that survived the attack that I want you to hear from. And another heads up that this one has been translated into English with the subtitles at the bottom, but if they're a bit fast for you to keep up with, I've also included the article below that has the entire thing transcribed for you. It is from this article, so I feel this is very important to hear what happened.
ובמשך שעה דופקים 10 מחבלים בהיכל הממ"ד, צעקות בערבית, זה היה שעה מאוד מאוד מתוחה והרגשנו בפחד שלא יתואר, ואחרי שעה הם מצליחים לפרוץ את הממ"ד ומוצאים אותנו, את ארבעתנו, לבית ליד, שכבר בו שהו 8 בני ערובה נוספים, אנחנו מצטרפים ל8 האלה ואנחנו הופכים להיות דרך כ12 בני ערובה, עם 40 מחבלים ששומרים עלינו. אני מקצרת לך את הסיפור.
הם מתעללים בכם?
הם לא מתעללים בנו, הם מתנהגים אלינו בצורה מאוד אנושית, זה אומר שהם שומרים עלינו. כן, מה זה אומר אנושית? שומרים עלינו, הם נותנים לנו לשתות פה ושם, שהם רואים שאנחנו בלחץ, הם מרגיעים אותנו. הייתה תחושה מאוד מאוד מפחידה, אבל אף אחד לא התנהג אלינו באלימות. למזלי, לא קרה לי מה שאני שומעת בתקשורת.
קרו דברים איומים ונוראים.
נכון, אבל אחרי שעתיים, בקיצור, בהתחלה לא היה שום גורם ביטחוני איתנו. אנחנו אלה שהתקשרנו במשטרה יחד עם החוטפים, כי החוטפים רצו שהמשטרה תגיע, כי המטרה שלהם הייתה לחטוף אותנו לעזה. בסיומה במהלכה, אחד המחבלים החליט להיכנע, זה מחבל שיצר איתי קשר במהלך השעתיים האלה, יצרתי קשר עם כמה מהחוטפים, אלה ששמרו על הבני ערובה.
כן.
והוא מחליט להשתמש בי כמגן אנושי, הוא מחליט להיכנע, אני לא מודעת לזה באותם רגעים, זה בדיעבד, הוא מתחיל להתפשט, הוא קורא לי ומתחיל לצאת איתי מהבית תחת אש, אני צועקת בזמן הזה לימ"מ כשהם יכולים לשמוע אותי, שיפסיקו לראות,
כן.
ואז הם שומעים אותי והם מפסיקים לראות, אני רואה על הדשא של בגינה של האנשים מהקיבוץ, שיש 5 בני ערובה ששוכבים, או 6, על האדמה בחוץ, ממש כצאן לטבח, מול הירי של הימ"מ שלנו והמחבלים.
הטרוריסטים ירו בהם?
לא, הם נהרגו מהחילופי ירי, תבין שהיה חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים.
זאת אומרת, יכול להיות שזה כוחותינו ירו בהם? כשניסו לפסל את החוטפים, את החמאס?
כן, חיסלו את כולם, כולל הבני ערובה, כי היה שם חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים. אני משוחררת בסביבות השעה 5:30, ב8:30 כנראה מסתיימת הלחימה, אחרי שהיה חילופי אש מטורפים, אפילו 2 פקזים של טנק שירו לתוך הבית, שזה בית קיבוצי קטן, זה לא איזה, רואים את זה בחדשות.
כן.
זה לא מקום גדול. וברגע הזה כולם נהרגו, היה שקט חוץ מניצולה אחת שיצאה הדס דגן, וזהו, וגם.
איך כולם נהרגו?
מהחילופי אש.
מהחילופי אש, כלומר יכול להיות שגם זה מאש כוחותינו?
חד משמעית.
כן?
וככה אני מאמינה.
אוי, זה נשמע כל כך רע.
כן, וכולם מתו.
You see, because information like that paired with airstrikes on locations where you're meant to have hostages makes me feel like the Israeli government just sees all humans as collateral damage. And now we're going to go back to the UK-Israel ambassador that says that Israel is responsible for Israeli citizens and Hamas is responsible for Palestinians. And I had to just include her commentary on children, and then brace yourself for the clip I have following that. Just wanted to give you some warnings.
We've been showing pictures this morning that would illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Are you a mother?
Yes.
What would you think if your children would have been executed in front of your eyes? Would you expect your government to think about those Nazis committing those crimes and to say, wait a second, first of all, we need to protect the enemy, and then to protect my children. Your children come as priority to your Prime Minister.
So do you know that? We have been showing images as well.
Now, I just wanted to add that I censored that video of the dead child from Gaza myself for the sake of having this video stay on YouTube and for your sake. And yeah, that raw footage, this has been a very, very difficult video to make, a very important video to make. And so now we're moving on to hospitals in Gaza. This is from the Canberra Times on the 18th of October 2023. Hundreds killed at Gaza hospital amid disputed claims. About 500 Palestinians have been killed in a blast at a Gaza hospital that Palestinian health authorities say was caused by an Israeli airstrike, but the Israeli military blamed on a failed rocket launch by a Palestinian military group. It took place on the eve of a visit by US President Joe Biden to Israel to show support for the country in its war with Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip.
The casualties, this will affect the admitted people in the hospital. In the hospital, we don't only have patients, we don't only have the casualties that we have treated. We have many civilians, they came to the hospital to find a safe place. We have more than 2,500 people who are in the hospital. So this will affect the staff, this will affect our work. This is an urgent appeal. Please, if you are a human, I'm not calling the Arab, I'm not calling the Muslim countries only. If you are a human, please, this is an urgent appeal. Please stop this. Save Gaza. Please support Gaza. We have no medical supplies. We have no gas, no food, no medication. We have nothing. This is an urgent appeal. Please stop this humanitarian crisis.
عظم الله دكتور عظم الله الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله على كل حال الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الحمد لله.
I'm going to need a journalist to respond to someone that says Israel has a right to defend itself with, yep, defend itself against a group that the Prime Minister of Israel in 2019 says you should support them financially, mainly to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. So you got to defend yourself against a group that the Prime Minister is supporting, and you've got billions and billions of dollars and over 150 members of your defense force, and yet still had hostages taken. Like I said in my previous video, you somewhat have a responsibility to defend yourself. Because I'm fine with going along with their narrative, and in doing that, that means that they, despite all of the manpower and all of the funding, can't defend itself. And ultimately can only seem to retaliate by hitting hospitals and killing thousands of people with airstrikes, telling them to go to safe locations and then hitting those safe locations. But I don't know if a journalist is going to ask that to anybody, but this will do. This, I'll take this.
He said that the humanitarian situation, quote, will only deteriorate exponentially, and that crucial life-saving supplies, including fuel, food, and water, must be allowed into Gaza. So the UN is saying you must do this. You are saying you're not going to do this. How do you?
No, we're not saying that.
He's saying do it. He's saying doing it immediately. What I'm saying is what you're doing.
No.
He's saying doing it immediately.
I got you. I'll tell you exactly what we're saying. I'm saying we will do everything for the Gazan people. Once and now, we demand immediate surrender, unconditional surrender of Hamas. If Hamas people come out with their hands up and clear their weapons, believe me, everything will be restored to Gaza. It is Hamas in Hamas hands.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that, sir. I think we're actually on the same page here. You're saying that once Hamas leaves, you'll grant the Gazan people food, shelter, fuel, electricity, hospitals, schooling. And if they don't, and if Hamas doesn't leave, then they'll continue to starve and die in hospitals. You are defining for the international community right now collective punishment. You're saying until Hamas acts differently, the 2 million people in Gaza are going to be treated this way. And once Hamas acts differently, these 2 million people in Gaza will be treated better. That is exactly what collective punishment is. You're holding them accountable for the actions of others. That is the definition, the textbook definition of collective punishment, sir. Now, you may accept that that's what you want to do, but this is absolutely a contravention of international law.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. No, had we pushed them into the wall, we're not pushing them to the wall. We want to open a humanitarian corridor so they can leave. But if Hamas,
so that who can leave? Citizens? You're saying civilians can leave, but only through the Rafah border, correct?
At this point, yes.
So they can't come.
Where else?
Your country. They can come into Israel.
I'm telling you one more thing I want to say.
I want you to address that point. Don't just smile, sir, respectfully. You're saying you're making a corridor. They can go to Egypt. You're bombing them. You say you want to save them, but they can't come in.
First of all, I'm not smiling. I'm crying in my...
I believe this is footage of that crossing being hit by an airstrike. And I noticed something in the chyron of the clip from the CNN journalist from Gaza that is relevant to this. Gaza being strangled by Israel's weekend-long siege while aid piles up on Egyptian side of the Rafah crossing, UN officials say. Diplomatic efforts to establish a humanitarian corridor to send desperately needed supplies to Gaza are ramping up before the coastal strip's 2.3 million residents completely run out of clean drinking water, food, fuel and medicine. The Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt is the only entry point into the enclave that Israel does not control. Egypt says airstrikes on the Gaza side have made roads inoperable. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share this video. And just like my last video on this, I'm going to wrap it all up with discussion about white phosphorus. Thanks again for watching.
I want to ask you about white phosphorus. You tweeted, Human Rights Watch tweeted October 12th, Israel's used white phosphorus in military operations in Gaza and Lebanon, putting civilians at risk of serious and long-term injuries. White phosphorus causes excruciating burns and can set homes afire. Its use in populated areas is unlawful. Israel's denied this. What proof do you have of this, Omar Shaker?
I mean, Israel also denied it in 2009 when Human Rights Watch documented it, and that turned out to be false, as was disproven by numerous other voices. Human Rights Watch, verified this evidence. It's confirmed. We were able to take video footage that took place both in Lebanon and Gaza, verify that it was recorded when it was taken. We ran these by weapons and munitions experts who confirmed that it was, that what was shown was white phosphorus. And then we interviewed people who live in the communities where the white phosphorus was dropped in Gaza near the port area, and their description of what it looked like and smelled like was consistent with the use of white phosphorus. Amnesty International followed up with their own reporting where they were able to verify, additional areas in which white phosphorus was used. They were able to look at, footage that was provided by the Israeli government of some of the weapon systems being used in Gaza, again, being able to source it. It was white phosphorus that was being carried by those planes. And of course, we're talking about a weapon that is, when dropped in civilian areas, is unlawful because it can, burn homes and other structures. It can cause lifelong suffering for the communities that live there. The fact that the Israeli government is using it, and let's note that they have, even when not used as a weapon, even when white phosphorus is used for signaling or obscuring the army, it can cause harm to civilians. And the Israeli army has readily available alternatives that have much of the same effect in terms of signaling or obscuring without the harm it causes to civilian populations.